The once stable partnership between the United States and Canada, long celebrated as one of the world's most enduring alliances, is now facing its most significant test in decades. What began as minor disagreements over tariffs has escalated into a full-blown trade standoff, with both sides digging in their heels. Tensions have spilled into public view as officials from both countries exchange sharp words and citizens take to the streets, voicing their concerns about jobs and economic security. In a bold and unprecedented move, Canada has secured a massive aluminium supply deal with European and Asian partners. This strategic pivot is more than just a business decision. It's a clear signal to Washington that Canada is prepared to diversify its trade relationships and reduce its dependence on the U.S. market. The fracture between the two countries is the culmination of months of tit-for-tat tariffs and increasingly heated rhetoric. The Trump administration's decision to impose steep tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium, citing the need to protect American industries, has only deepened the divide and fueled uncertainty. The integrated economies of the US and Canada mean that this conflict is not just a political spat, it threatens to unravel decades of economic cooperation. Supply chains that once flowed seamlessly across the border are now at risk, and businesses on both sides are bracing for higher costs and potential layoffs. Consumers, too, are beginning to feel the pinch as prices rise and shelves empty. Feeling increasingly cornered by repeated tariff threats, Canada is forging new alliances and seeking alternative markets. Meanwhile, the US is doubling down on economic nationalism, determined to protect its industries at any cost, even if it means alienating its closest neighbor. The result is a high-stakes confrontation between two of the world's closest allies, leaving businesses, workers, and policymakers scrambling to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. The uncertainty is palpable, and the stakes could not be higher. As new trade routes emerge and old partnerships are tested, the North American trade landscape has entered a new, uncertain era, one where the only certainty is change. At the heart of the dispute is Canada's landmark 10-year, $30 billion aluminium deal with European and Asian manufacturers. This agreement marks a strategic shift, diverting a significant portion of Canadian aluminium away from the US and toward new global partners. The deal is a direct response to the volatility of American trade policy, offering Canadian producers stability and a guaranteed market. By locking in long-term contracts, Canada is protecting its jobs and industry from unpredictable US tariffs. The move positions Canada as a reliable global supplier, reducing its dependence on the American market. For Canadian workers and communities, the deal brings much-needed security and leverage in ongoing negotiations with Washington. Canada's pivot is both a defensive shield and a bold play for global relevance. The Trump administration's response to the growing trade tensions has been both swift and severe, signaling a dramatic shift in U.S. economic policy. Determined to send a clear message to both domestic and international audiences, the administration wasted no time in taking bold action. One of the most significant moves was the decision to double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, raising them to a staggering 50%. This sudden increase sent shockwaves through the industry, affecting manufacturers and workers on both sides of the border. The tariffs didn't stop there. Washington quickly expanded them to cover a wider range of goods, targeting products that are vital to North American supply chains and everyday consumers. Officially, these measures are justified as necessary steps to protect American industries and safeguard national security. Yet, behind the scenes, they also serve as powerful leverage, pressuring Canada to reconsider its own foreign policy decisions and trade practices. The administration's America First agenda frames tariffs as a strategic tool, one designed to force better deals, address what it sees as unfair trade imbalances, and reassert U.S. dominance in global commerce. However, critics from both political parties and the business community argue that these tariffs disrupt complex supply chains, increase costs for manufacturers, and ultimately hurt American consumers and small businesses through higher prices and uncertainty. Despite mounting backlash and protests in Washington and beyond, the administration remains steadfast, prioritizing economic sovereignty and national interests over potential diplomatic fallout with key allies. The escalating tariffs have now become a defining feature of U.S. trade strategy, dominating headlines and fueling uncertainty in global markets, regardless of the broader economic consequences. The U.S. government insists it is willing to endure short-term pain, job losses, higher prices, and market volatility, for what it believes will be long-term gain and a stronger negotiating position. As tensions continue to rise and the trade war shows no sign of slowing, the world watches closely, uncertain of what the next chapter will bring. In response to mounting trade tensions, Canada has taken decisive action, imposing its own tariffs on over $20 billion worth of American goods. This bold move is not just about economics, it's a clear message that Canada will not back down when its interests are threatened. These tariffs are carefully targeted at key U.S. industries, from steel and aluminum to agricultural products, aiming to maximize political pressure and encourage a return to fair negotiations. Perhaps the most significant act of defiance is Canada's new aluminium deal with Europe and Asia, which opens up fresh markets and reduces reliance on the United States. By forging these international partnerships, Canada is actively reducing its vulnerability to sudden U.S. policy shifts and building a more resilient economy. Prime Minister Mark Carney has publicly framed these bold moves as essential steps to protect Canada's economic interests in an increasingly unpredictable and unstable world. At the same time, Canada has demonstrated flexibility and pragmatism in its approach to international trade. For example, under intense U.S. pressure, Canada decided to rescind a planned digital services tax, choosing to avoid a multi-front trade war that could have further strained relations. Despite its tough stance, Ottawa continues to seek a negotiated settlement, balancing the need for retaliation with a commitment to diplomacy and dialogue. The government's dual approach is designed to defend Canada's economic sovereignty while always keeping the door open for future cooperation with its largest trading partner. Canada's evolving strategy is built on resilience, diversifying its markets, strengthening global partnerships, and engaging in calculated negotiation to secure its future. The ultimate challenge now is convincing Washington that true partnership, not confrontation, is the best path forward for both nations. The US-Canada dispute is part of a global wave of trade friction driven by the Trump administration's aggressive use of tariffs. Washington's hardline tactics extend to Mexico, Brazil, and China, blending economic and political grievances to reshape global commerce. This approach creates constant uncertainty, forcing countries and businesses to adapt to shifting demands. Nations are forming new alliances and redirecting trade flows to reduce reliance on the U.S. market. China is boosting exports to developing nations, while the EU signs new deals, including the aluminium agreement with Canada. The result is a global reshuffling, with regional trade blocs gaining strength as a counterbalance to American pressure. The world is adapting, and the U.S. risks losing influence as others fill the vacuum. The trade battlefield is now truly global. The trade war's impact is hitting home, with American industries facing a 15 to 20% shortfall in Canadian aluminium. Manufacturers in automotive, aerospace, and construction are scrambling for alternatives, driving up costs and threatening jobs. Large corporations have tried to absorb the increases, but rising prices are inevitable for consumers. Small businesses are especially vulnerable, with many struggling to survive as material costs soar. The tariffs, meant to protect American workers, may end up putting their jobs at risk. Financial markets have reacted with volatility, reflecting deep uncertainty about the future. Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledges that tariffs are raising business costs and slowing hiring. The economic fallout is real, and the pain is spreading across the U.S. economy. As North America's trade war rages, Europe and Asia are seizing the opportunity. The Canadian aluminium deal gives their industries a stable, high-quality supply, boosting competitiveness and economic security. This strategic partnership allows them to plan confidently, while American manufacturers face shortages and higher costs. The EU and Japan are strengthening their industrial bases and global influence, capitalizing on U.S. isolationism. The deal highlights the risks of over-reliance on a single trading partner and the benefits of diversification. When old friends fight, others gain. Europe and Asia are turning North America's turmoil into their own advantage. Global supply lines are being redrawn. The US-Canada trade war has pushed their relationship into uncharted territory, transforming a model alliance into a cautionary tale. Canada's aluminium deal marks a turning point, signaling a willingness to chart a new course if relations don't improve. The upcoming USMCA review looms as the next major flashpoint, with deep mistrust clouding negotiations. Both sides face pressure to find a diplomatic off-ramp, but any resolution will require real concessions. The integrated North American economy is being pulled apart with rising costs and uncertainty for all. Meanwhile, Europe and Asia are forging ahead, and the world is watching and learning. The next months will determine whether North America can rebuild trust or remain divided in a new era of global trade.